Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Daniel Johnson. I'm the Global Channel Chief for CloudCapsule. Welcome to another Partner Spotlight. I'm joined by our CEO, founder, and three-time Microsoft MVP, Nick Ross.
Hey, guys. Good to be here.
And we're really happy to have Joe and Robby from TransformITive joining us today to kind of talk about their practice and kind of how we see the future of the MSP market and kind of their unique take on it. So, Joe, I'll let you get started, maybe give us a quick introduction, and then we'll pass it off to Robby.
Sure. Joe Markert, CEO and founder of TransformITive, formerly Function One, like the help key on your keyboard, for those of you old enough to remember such a thing. Launched this company before there were MSP tools, like many of you out there. And we made a big transition in 17, 18 we can dig into really focusing on business transformation, modernization with a Microsoft-centric core, and rebranded as TransformITive in 21 to really live that mission. Principally based out of the San Francisco Bay Area, but we've been nationwide since 2012. And we've had globalized teams for the last 8-9 years now. And principal industries we focus on, there's a lot. We built this company on architecture and engineering, but we have clients across the map now, all these years on.
That's great. And Robby.
Hey, Dan. I'm Robby. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for TransformITive. I'm fortunate enough to have joined Joe about a year ago, and really just we had so much synergy on both of our missions, both personally and professionally. I've been in the tech space for well over a decade now, where I've had the great pleasure of working for Insight, GoDaddy, TD Synnex, and Avnet. All of them I've had very GM-like roles, so understanding that full end-to-end go-to-market. And as I kind of teamed up with Joe, focus on that customer outcome. So really making sure that the technology is driving towards a specific goal. For so many people get stuck in, marketing does nothing, sales is not performing, making sure that they understand how the whole ecosystem comes together to make that well-fueled engine.
Yeah, super excited to have you guys here today, and excited to kind of dive into a variety of different topics. I know we'll pop around to a couple of different areas there, but would love to start, where you mentioned too, Joe, just on that shift that you guys made around that 2017, 2018 timeframe, and kind of how you speak to what it means to unpack more of that business transformation and what that means for you guys and kind of your client engagement model maybe behind that too.
Yeah, I think really there was kind of this aha moment, which wouldn't necessarily be so obvious, but like most of us, we had a traditional MSP practice. We had made the transition from device-based billing to person-based billing, focusing on outcomes for people, not devices. And we kind of were being everything to everyone though. And I think there was this moment we were working on a compliance program for a company that was working with a large utility here in the state of California. And just keep it simple, we had to use so many different tools to try to achieve compliance. And fast forward like a year later, we had a new consultant that was working with us, and we were helping a customer win banks as clients. And we were able to pass muster for one of those large banks in under 3 weeks. So this company had nothing in place. And we did it all with Microsoft's Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. And it was really just going through that process was an aha moment that, wow, we can get all this done within one platform. Microsoft was really starting to push the whole Surface product line, which we were really enjoying early on. And SharePoint and other cloud initiatives that they had ceded so much ground to Google, they were starting to right the wrongs of that strategy. And we just saw this all coalescing, and we were, dare I say, I guess we were becoming fanboys, if I call myself out. We were getting excited about it. And we thought that was a pivotal moment for us. We decided, let's go all in on this. It's not to say we don't have clients on Google. That customer that we were winning banks for was a Google-focused customer, but we were securing them with Microsoft. It was still more cost-effective to do that than to buy a bunch of third-party tools. And so I think that moment just kind of coalesced for us that by focusing on what we could do with the Microsoft platform to enable modernization, cloud adoption, transformation, and that security was at the core of everything we were doing, it just kind of crystallized the vision for us. And that's what kind of began the journey that led us to TransformITive down the road.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, especially even now, right? It's been 7 years since then, and there's still a lot of laggards, obviously, if you call it that, in the sense of the adoption curve for some of those factors. But also on the business transformation side. Obviously, COVID accelerated a lot in that regard, but would love to hear you speak to maybe how that rippled through your back end organization in the sense of like team structure or, resources and specialty areas that you wanted to shift focus on.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to have a sobering conversation around the character that is the pandemic. We're talking about where the industry is going right now, and I don't think we can do that without talking about the pandemic because, to your point, Nick, it really accelerated transformation. I think Satya quite famously said we had like 300x transformation in the course of a couple months in mid 2020 than a decade prior. And I think, there's so many places we could dip into, but really quickly, I think for us, it's an important, informative tale. We didn't fare so well right out of the gate. And, I love to hear all these people, how amazing they just cleaned up and so much business and it was great for them. But, we lost 40% overnight because a lot of our business was hospitality. That's how we ended up going nationwide so early on. We had to help some very large hospitality clients be able to scale out and support them in a nationwide fashion. And, that was great because it gave us all these skills that we otherwise would not have had. But it also impacted us quite dramatically when we had those hits in 2020 and 21. So I think maybe, we can go a number of different directions there, but I think the core takeaway of that moment for us is that it forced us to really rethink the model and really think about, somewhat through the survival lens. It wasn't that bad, but we had to get creative and figure out how do we continue to be relevant, continue to provide value. More importantly, how do we do these transformation projects that now a bunch of customers were suddenly asking for? How do we do that when they may not even have the money to spend, or if they do, they're afraid to spend it because they don't know what's around the corner? So that really began the journey of us taking the model that we were already landing on and kind of really gave us a petri dish, if you will, forgive the analogy, for us to play in and kind of figure out how will this work, this concept that we had that is, our modern workplace program today.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up too, because what we noticed, I was driving an MSP at the time as well during the pandemic. And what we noticed is one of the keys to getting that transformation done was to have a simpler tool set, to have not so many plates that you're spinning. You were a little bit more agile, and you could get those business results, those business outcomes faster. Get machines deployed faster if they were already in Intune, if they were already embracing the 365 stack and kind of the add-on ecosystem of it all. That seemed to increase that agility quite a bit, where if we were having to rely on a lot of third-party solutions, it just, even though they're great solutions, it created complexity and it slowed the process down and stuff like that. So that's an interesting take on kind of that Microsoft first approach through the lens of the pandemic.
100%. And I think two things that came out of that for us. One, Microsoft very graciously provided us a roadmap. They were like, here's our recommended roadmap for, best practices around transformation. And so we turned around and we embraced that and productized it. And we had all these clients that had not begun the journey that we had been evangelizing since 2017. And so now suddenly they're like, we want all that. Please help us. But I think, and so that gave us a kind of a clear mandate. This is how we're going to do it. This is what we're going to roll through. This is driving ROI for the customer. So it was an easy sell through. We just started very simply by asking for a little bit more per user per month and a longer contract term versus big project costs up front. And that got us that reliable MRR to get through a tough time. And it got the clients what they needed. And it gave us some early proof of concept on, and to learn how to do this effectively, right? We didn't know how to do all this perfectly. But the other thing I think that it really kind of a nice side effect is we got to avoid the frenzy that was all the security play in the MSP market at that time, because we didn't need to buy into every product that suddenly was tagging security at the end of their sales or value prop marketing materials. Like Microsoft was able to get a great deal of it done. Hey, maybe I'm not going to argue if it was perfect or not, but it allowed us to check the boxes that we needed to check for our clients without, to your point, Daniel, getting caught up in all of these additional products and tools and plates to spin. So that's a great call out.
Yeah, I think just kind of capping some of that off is, Also the notion of, for those people that were already started on the journey to modern workplace, they were able to complete that journey fairly quickly, where we saw a lot of the folks that still had a lot of on-premise technology struggling. They were having to build VPNs, and they were having to figure out what happens if a piece of gear goes down in that office. And we just saw a shift in like literal business agility. Those that were already embracing the cloud and kind of modern security concepts around identity, cloud-based identity, seem to have a much better go at it. And I think that resonates true to today as we start to look at, this next evolution of solutions, whether that's AI, whether it's the next level of advanced security. People that have taken that initial leap into the modern workplace are faring quite better.
I think two things on that. One, if it was not for everybody, of course, but it very quite literally saved jobs for some of our clients. The idea of being cloud-based and not tied to a building running your own data center. One client that I always share this story, it's unique, of course, it wasn't everybody's experience, but they had a lease coming up and we were able to save them 40 grand a month by shifting them into the cloud versus continuing to have infrastructure on site. And that meant they could retain employees versus having to let people go. So it was a very tangible outcome for them. And then I think we've all seen that those clients that did really engage in transformation or in earnest came out the other side of this going, wow, that wasn't as bad as we thought it was. What's next? Where do we go from here? And I that was a really welcome outcome, I think, is being able to start for some of those more mature clients, getting deeper into that conversation. Seeing us as that partner, right, that could do that.
Makes sense. And that maybe leads to kind of fast forwarding to today and how you guys think about this, but I'd love to hear kind of how that works when you're talking to new customers or existing customers, maybe about new engagements that you want to drive internal to the organization, kind of two-pronged, maybe for you too, Robby, on some of the go-to-market strategies that you guys might be leveraging, or some of the messaging and talk track that seems to be working well with clients. Joe, you shared a great story with me the other day, just around AI readiness and some of the things you guys are doing there, but could be, obviously just more of the holistic too.
Sure. I can open this up, and I'd love to let Robby have the mic for a minute because he's really been instrumental in getting us focused and ready to make the transition to a more sales focused MSP versus what we've been quite out myself. We were more operational MSP. We weren't actively selling. There's a lot of the kind of the warm referral scenario. And we've been really good at winning business. We were fortunate, but we had that leaky bucket syndrome of clients slipping out the back, right? Because we weren't winning new ones fast enough. So I'll let Robby talk to that. But I think the one thing I would say up front that might be helpful is we're all looking at this. We see the market transitioning now where, unfortunately, if we think about the transition of MSP from firefighters, necessary evil to, okay, now we're working on modernization and we're starting to develop some ROI. Okay, we got this big security push now. We got to get everybody secure. Well, where we're going next is really outside of operational IT. Now the expectation from the more mature clients is how do we apply this in finance, HR, elsewhere in operations, sales, marketing, as Robby can speak to, and AI is a big component of that. And so I think what we've really been leaning into is starting the conversation, unlike most companies are expecting an MSP to start. And I simply say, look, our whole goal when they ask what it is that we're going to do for them is to unlock the revenue trapped in their business. And that's where we start the conversation. And we talk about people and process, then tools. We're not going to lead with the tools. Let's just start by understanding who you are, where you want to go. Do you have the right team for that? Do you have the right processes? And then what are the goals that we're trying to achieve? And when we start the conversation there, which we didn't always do, mind you, it took us a while to realize that was the approach that works. It also works really well at cocktail parties. Don't say I work in IT, they're on to the next person. But if you tell them I'm going to unlock the business trapped in your revenue, or revenue trapped in your business, people suddenly perk up. Wait, whoa, how do you do that? And I think that kind of shift in mindset is, and certainly Robby's been instrumental in helping us kind of shape that mindset as well, is really kind of getting people to let their guard down and open up real dialogue.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point in the differentiation is the world and the marketplace is evolving so rapidly. We had this rush of COVID. Now we have AI. Thinking about how do you roadmap for the next year. I don't have a crystal ball for that, but what I do know is how business owners are thinking and getting ready for that, what that looks like. I think I followed Dell for a long time, and Michael Dell was always telling them, hey, I want to be the company that puts us out of business next year. And that's really taking that mindset of how do we help our customers do that? And that's not dumping the AI buzzword on them. It's leading with those outcomes. If we help bolster their sales, increase productivity, increase profitability, that's what they're trying to achieve. AI, other tools, processes, that's just how you get there. But ultimately, that's what they want to focus on, and shifting from that, traditional IT to that business technology. These are all just tools to achieve certain outcomes and showing them how to do that. And so many customers we get, and we've onboarded and got them down the road, they're like, I have like 20 marketing tools and they all suck. And I'm like, well, they don't all suck. You just don't know how to use them, and you don't need 20. So let's save some money and do that. And that's such a different narrative than, hey, we got 24/7 support. We can be your Microsoft partner, focusing on those outcomes, because that's why they have Break Fix. That's why they have a Microsoft partner, because they're ultimately trying to achieve a specific goal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we're seeing a big shift with that, with the progressive mindset around, I see a lot of now on MSPs websites, even moving from a services tab at the top of your website to a solutions tab that focuses on, those business outcomes that you're trying to deliver. But would love to hear from you guys more about that blueprint around your transformative approach, that you use with the clients, and kind of bring them in on that level as far as kind of the first onboarding path, and then the ongoing engagement and what that might look like too.
Sure, I can kick that off. I mean, it starts there with conversation, right? Because I think we all learned, or are learning, that when we, or I certainly did when I stopped selling, is when I sold the most. And when we just come in and start with a dialogue with a customer, invariably, Robby's always like looking at the metrics, like, we want you talking less, with the customer talking more. And you can see all that now on these call analytics. So, and this guy likes to talk, as you might have picked up already. But I think really getting the customer speaking, because by the end of that call, if we do it well, we didn't sell anything. We just solved a bunch of things together. We just kind of collaborated. And that call, I think, becomes the SOW. It becomes the proposal for the engagement. And if you walk out of there with them, like, what's next? Where do we go from here? And I think that's really sets the tone for everything we're going to do after that. I think, we can dig into different areas along this, but one of the things that I think we've learned, if I rewind back to 2021, when we started really, kind of embracing this concept of the best practices roadmap for transformation, we had really started to productize what we were doing. We started to build out the ability to kind of assess where we felt the client was in their technical maturity journey. And so we do a bit of a gap assessment, and we kind of had these 3 phases that we had put them into, which is really, enable, modernize, and transform. And where are you in that journey? And if you're in transform, you're working on, not in the business. A lot of companies are more in that modernized space in the middle. And still, we find clients that are still just sustaining and in that enablement phase. So we kind of figure out where they are first, and then we define a roadmap based on that. But one of the things I'll share, just keep this real, honest, and interesting, is that we thought we were pretty smart. Hey, we have this whole program figured out. We can come up with this transformation readiness score. And this is really great because we kind of know, right, what we're going to be able to sell and to whom and who needs what, who's ready for what. And then we forgot about the people. Oh, wait, in order for us to be successful, we need to understand what is the appetite for change, for, what is the real readiness of the organization. And Robby and I together had a really interesting moment last year where we thought for sure we had a home run with one of our more mature clients. And then, nothing survives its first encounter with a customer. We realized, gosh, we hadn't accounted. On some level, we had accounted for this human factor. And by that, I mean, it's more psychological than technological, these conversations. And I think MSPs are I'm going to argue that if in order for us to survive and get past the commoditization that is happening in our space, we are going to have to become a bit of a psychologist of the scenario. And to that point, we actually have a change management consultant on our staff to come in and help us assess, does this org have champions? Do they have a success rate in adoption? Is there, is leadership involved? Because we can't affect change from outside. It has to be top down. These aren't MSP topics, generally speaking, but I would challenge that if we're going to be successful in this next phase of MSP, we have to be thinking about that. So, yes, tactical onboarding, all that, that's pretty much almost a science. And I think we all have a version of that. But I think the special sauce comes in figuring out the people component, how that marries with the technical component, and defines your level of effort in your engagement strategy. And that's the piece we were really missing until kind of late last year, if I'm honest. And we're just now sorting that out.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because what we found in our MSP history is the more that we started to focus on business process and the optimization of that business process, then we kind of learned a little bit about the people that we're using or defining that process and how that process can affect their productivity, their livelihood, and even their engagement level. And then how do we craft a strategy that addresses both the process, the people involved in the process, and the tooling that we need in order to accelerate that process or optimize it in some cases. So yeah, that's an interesting observation for sure.
And I want to clarify, I don't tell Joe to talk less because of his quality, but it's ultimately, I think you made a good point. It's that psychology, right? The psychologist doesn't talk to you the whole time you're there. You talk to them. And I feel like where I focused a lot of is, and not that this was bad before, but we just had a customer that we won, and we knew all of the onboarding that needed to go. It wasn't, hey, here's our systems, here's how these things work. We did so well in the pre-sales phase, if you can call it that, not that we were selling anything, but so much of that pre-sales phase was understanding their needs and addressing them and kind of building out that roadmap. So when we onboarded day one, it was, and it was crazy because how many customers come to you and are like, give me the portal, give me this, give me that. It's, well, when are we going to start? They're like, hey, we got 5 projects we talked about doing. You got them on the timeline. When's each one going off? Day one. So they knew the plan exactly. And I think that makes the onboarding so much smoother because they know exactly what we need to do. And as much as Joe led them a little bit, we built the plan together. So that day started, that really made it for a frictionless onboarding experience so that we could get straight to work. And we talk about that ROI so much. Talk about not 3 weeks of onboarding tools. It's jumping right into the first initiatives.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's really interesting to hear. I've never heard that in the sense of the role you guys have from the change management process and kind of having somebody dedicated to do that deeper dive on the business. I think that's highly important. But we also see a contrast in the sense of like the communication breakdowns, especially in the forefront of most of these engagements, especially as we kind of pivot into more cybersecurity conversations. We hear a lot, in the space of, MSPs going and trying to get their customers into continuous improvement, but obviously there's a lot more labor with that. There's more intensive focus, but usually the number one constraint or callback from the customer is, I thought you guys were already doing that for us. And so the communication at the forefront and continuously has always broken down where there's this misperception of basic security standards that we're supporting versus more advanced security we'll implement. Curious if you guys hear that. It sounds like you get ahead of it, but would love to hear your perspective on that too.
Yes, we realized for sure at one moment, as because the program improves, right? And invariably, new tools come along, new capabilities, requirements come along. And if you're already billing for that thing in particular, Nick, it's like, that's the toughest conversation. Like, hey, so we need a little bit more to do this thing. Well, wait, I thought you were doing that thing, but no, it's different now. And here's why. I'll say 2 things about that because I like doing 2 things apparently today. One is that we decided early on to stop selling security and just include it. And I think a number of my peers would say the same. Like, we didn't want to have haves and have-nots. We didn't want to try to educate everybody on why it's important. We just wanted them to have it so that we can all focus on, the more important things. You can't have transformation without security as a foundation. So I think the other piece of that was then really having, I think if the customer's surprised a little bit, maybe we didn't do a good enough job of communicating consistently with them. And I think that's something that's common is we all get busy. We're wrapped up in the client that's the noisiest, has the most need. Maybe he's writing the bigger check at that moment. We forget to message to the rest of our clients and keep them, advocating for ourselves, but also for them. Like, these are the things coming, these things to be aware of. And I mean, I think it's an overused phrase, but security is a journey, not a destination, is an important way for us to convey to the client, like, this will ever be evolving. There is no point at which it's done. And as long as we help convey that up front, when those changes or pivots or adjustments come, it doesn't make the conversation any more fun that we're asking for perhaps more money for a different tool, or we got to go through this process again. But at least they're conditioned to understand, like, we're bringing these to you because you've asked us to be this person, to be this advocate, deep research, continuing to set you guys up for what's next.
I think one interesting aspect, though, that we're seeing too in this next chapter with AI being at the forefront of it is, to some extent, the cybersecurity discussion was still kind of the MSP's problem. Even if you took the approach like you did, which is, hey, this is going to be included, it's going to be a part of the foundation of our relationship, I think there is still a lot of this, I don't understand all that. Just make sure it's good. Here, I'll write you a check. You make sure it happens. And I think, we know that it's not that. You have to be working hand in hand with customers to, improve their security over time and deal with market conditions. But I think we're going to see the amplification of that with AI. AI is not something you just buy and enable. You have to, there's an entire strategy, there's an entire, unpacking of business process and all of this that we're going to see with that. And also weaving it into what the security strategy is for all of that. So I think it'll revive some of that security conversation that some customers have pushed to the back of the stove. It'll kind of relight that and say, oh, I guess we do need to revisit this in order to really unleash the power of AI as we go forward.
I think that's so true, because one of the things as we lead into this conversation with unlocking the revenue trapped in your business, and for smaller, or it's not even about size, it's mindset. For clients who maybe are more fixated on, I need to see the return before I'm going to move, versus the clients who are like, we just know we're going to get the right outcomes. Let's go. Let's stay ahead of the pack. We've even put together some calculators to help quantify what kind of return they might expect to see if they simplify their stack, invest in AI, and start looking at automation and other capabilities there. But what's great about that is the clients understand that language. Those are financial conversations generally, and the return on investment and opportunity cost, all of these things a more mature client tends to understand. It's all the other stuff that you told them you want to do that they tuned out, in some meeting, quarters before. And now that actually gives us the opportunity, if we look at the glass half full, to say, okay, you want to get to AI, great. So do we. We'll do there's some things we can do in parallel here to get you to the fun part. But remember all that stuff we were telling you we needed to do. What's nice, though, is the side effect. I even had a forestry management company, extremely smart people, but not super tech savvy. They don't, they use a lot of tech in their job, but it's not like they're living the way and breathing this the way we do. But of course, great business people, very well educated folks. They understood right away that AI was going to get a return on investment for them, get time backs, expedite some of their processes and busy work. And so all those things I laid out for them that we needed to do, including security, they were like, get it done, give me the proposal. So I think there is an opportunity to kind of, the previous carrot and stick was insurability, cyber reliability, and that's not going to go away. I don't mean to kind of belittle that need, but it's not as exciting. Oh, I'll be cybersecurity compliant as it is. Ooh, I get to use AI to do these things in my business. So this is a far more, it's a fun conversation to have with clients versus just getting to use the tactical stick of, don't you want to have insurance? Some people do. Some people still don't care, quite frankly.
Yeah. And on that note, we see obviously there's client variance in who really appreciates getting reporting, back on their security and kind of that progression. But what are you guys seeing internally, and maybe what are some things that you see that might be working better in the sense of those conversations or touch points you have, with your clients about their security posture and how it's improved or regressed, if it has at all.
Yeah, I think everybody understands red, yellow, green. I mean, it depends on who you're talking to, right? The persona, as Robby would say, like, are we talking to ownership, leadership? Is it a co-managed engagement, and we're really talking to IT? So we have to tailor, the amount of data we're going to show to the audience that's there on the call. But I think that is a place that we've struggled for a long time to really have great, meaningful tools. I mean, we all know showing a secure score in a Microsoft portal does not an indication of posture. So I think we were early on this, but certainly not doing it extremely well because we've not had clients in, high compliance areas or DoD or places like that where we really had to become, an MSSP. It's really fortunate for us. We've had a couple of edge cases like the one I described earlier that kind of helped us with the pivot, but most of it has been voluntary framework adherence. So for our customers, it's been this kind of an easier conversation to say, hey, we have a target we want to hit. This is where you are in terms of hitting that target. And people seem to understand that. And what's the benefit of doing it? Well, maybe you're going to not go out of business if there is an event, not an if, but a when. Maybe we can get insurance and maybe today even get it at a discount if we can validate your posture. And I always try to implore customers, it doesn't work for every industry, but especially if that customer is holding data of their clients in turn, to implore upon them that security is a sales, proposition. It's a sales motion. I am taking these extra steps to ensure that not only my business is safe, but your data, is safe with us as well, downstream to their clients. And I think that's, not every customer understands that, but I think that's a piece that we should be leaning into is helping them understand it's just not just best practice, but it is a sales opportunity. When they're looking at multiple potential companies and you've done all these things to go above and beyond to protect their interests and their data, it says something about you as a company, I think, as a vendor.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and kind of just putting yourself in their shoes as far as like what do they want to be delivering to their downstream customers, or if they're asked, right? Like you said, may not be in highly regulated verticals or industries, but people are still going to ask, just given the current state of things right now as well too. As you guys think about that, as you look towards the future, is there any major components you're wanting to invest a lot more time in, or you're just kind of leaning into existing practices and refining them, or how does that look for you guys?
No, I think, and this is a place where Robby can pick up as well. I think we're very focused on kind of introducing the concept of best known methods, of really successful companies. So like objectives, key results, for example. We're really interested in bringing that concept to our clients who aren't already living, say, an EOS, OKR type vision. And within those models, right, it's really about measuring success. We set an objective, define these initiatives, and then what are the key results? How do we define what the success factors are? And so I think that's something, whether it's security and compliance, or in Robby's case, introducing the customer to the idea of, financial operations, revenue operations. Let's look at how you meet your customers and what their journey is and help you improve your business, not just turn the servers on, but let's maybe help you win more clients or do more with the clients you have. All of those things are tied to KPIs. And that's really what I think we're leaning into most right now across the board is identifying the tools. And some of these are not MSP tools. Some of these are more traditional sales platforms or customer success engagement tool platforms that allow us to have those kinds of metrics to validate that what we're doing for you is achieving these results.
We use the term journey a lot, and I think for security it's true, and for the customer. And you need a few things. You talked about the reporting, right, around security. Showing them where they are today is huge, right? You don't know how to, you can't finish the journey if you don't know where you are today. So giving them that results of, audits, reporting, say, hey, this is where you are today. But as we all know, that doesn't mean where you have to be forever. And a lot of our customers are missing people to guide them. I know Joe loves this, but be their Sherpa through this journey. When you talk about AI, when you talk about achieving those outcomes, a lot of the customers don't have somebody maybe like myself or Dan or Nick like you to guide some of those initiatives that they have. And we have a really unique opportunity to say, hey, this is where you are today, and be that Sherpa to guide them on that journey, whether it's AI, whether it's RevOps, whether it's security. And that's where I see a lot of our offerings going is truly, and I've never been a consultant fan, but really that partner for them to guide them through that journey so that what AI do I need? There was a customer I talked to yesterday. He's tried like 50 different AI tools. And I'm like, we really got to dial this back. It's good to test, but and he's like, well, each one's only like 40%. So I'm going to get ROI. And we go back to that laying of the foundation like we do with security and getting ready for AI. And that's really where we have that ability to be that Sherpa. And if I was giving guidance to anybody or sharing with you guys where we're going, it's taking that true Sherpa role, which also includes change management too, so that all the people come with, and helping them along that journey so that, because I think a lot of people are going to get in that, well, how do I get the ROI? And then how do I do this? And that's where we, not just as transformative, but MSPs in general have that unique position to sit in if they have that knowledge and build the right team and programs.
I think it's interesting too, because when you look at the MSP market over the last 10 or 15 years, the really successful MSPs have been the ones that have been able to climb that operational maturity mountain, right? That have embraced EOS or similar framework, that sort of thing. And now what we're talking about is taking all those lessons that we've learned, because we've been so self-introspective. We've really been looking at the DNA of these MSP businesses. Now we're taking it out to our client base and trying to raise their operational maturity in kind, and even assess it, like you were saying, kind of like, well, where are you in your journey before we even take the first step? Let's take a look at what your operational maturity really is. And it's interesting to see that this journey of MSPs is starting to rub off on the clients of MSPs and transforming their businesses in kind. So that's really cool.
That's the opportunity. And the trick is how do we all do it? How do we present ourselves? How do we get out of the server room and into the boardroom? How do we start to have those conversations? It's always easier with a net new client because you have a new story, a new talk track you're trying on, and you can get that trust right out of the gate. So it's always harder, I think, for us when our older clients, suddenly we're asking them to see us in a different light. And that for us, I think, too, is where the change management consultant has been able to come in and be helpful. And it's now, we're not just the tech guy saying, let's do these things. Like, here's someone who's a leadership management, change management consultant, helps lots of successful businesses or organizations. You too can be that successful organization if only you'd, listen to what we have to say. So that, it's definitely being humble in that regard and trying to help them. And I think partnering up too. I think one of the things, all of us have those clients we've had for a long time, and they start to see you, whether you realize it or not, they start to see you as an equal. You're a business owner. And we've always, when we've fallen down, we've always been honest and owned it. When we've had issues with client, employees, we've never hidden it. We've told them, look, we're having this issue. And maybe you would or wouldn't be surprised how many times the client's like, oh, I've been there too. And they immediately let their guard down. They partner up with you. Man, I've had that. Do you need help? You need, with this. And I think those kind of building those relationships too, getting above just the transactional, is really a key part of starting that foundation with your existing clients and getting them to let you into their decision-making process and seeing you as a peer. But I mean, Nick, to your core ask there, it's like, yes, like we're constantly in search of what is the data we want to show. I mean, we think of the traditional QBR, and even today I've seen people list out, this is what we're going to do in a QBR. And I'm like, really? Who's coming to that meeting? It's like, I don't think anybody cares about your patch management or, how many tickets got open this month. I mean, let's face it, if you've done transformation, you've probably watched your tier 1 ticket counts drop. If you've done any of this journey. So how do we remain relevant? How do we continue to add value, justify the contract cost? I think we have to start showing business data, and we have to start showing, metrics that we're probably a little uncomfortable with or not used to as most MSPs.
Yeah, and I think a healthy byproduct, what you guys are mentioning here, is if you do become that trusted business advisor, partner, owner type of mindset with those business leaders, then the constraint then becomes they want you to do everything, or they come to you for everything, which you're not, ever going to scale to be successful in that regard. So you have to say yes and no, or direct them to strategic resources, potentially, and things like that. So I'd love to hear. It sounds like that point was towards the strategic resources. We'd love to hear you guys expand on that too.
It's exactly right. As we leaned into the realization, okay, A, we can't be everything to everyone, nor should we try. We should stay in our lane. But if we're really going to pitch ourselves as Robby said, as the Sherpa, and I think to clarify, like a lot of us have done advisory work. I advise you to do these things, but it's a very different thing to roll up your sleeves and get in and take a leadership role in driving those outcomes with the customer. And in order to do that, you invariably, for a variety of reasons, sometimes just social proof, sometimes actually the expertise we don't carry. And I think Robby and I have spent the last year really collecting subject matter experts that we can bring in to tackle certain. And so in the beginning of our relationship, Robby was that for us. Well, Robby's a subject matter expert on the vendor side of the house, sales, marketing, go-to-market strategy, packaging. So now we can have a real conversation with our clients around their marketing and their sales strategy and customer journey. Robby was that subject matter expert. Now we're collecting other people like the change management consultant, or we have some practice management consultants for our architectural and engineering firms. We've been doing that vertical, servicing that vertical for 15 plus years, but we're not trying to supplant, say a BIM manager in the company or an operational specialist in the company. So we bring in these people that augment us, elevate our status, because now they're seeing us. Oh, okay, these guys are serious. They understand our business, but they're bringing the right people for the right moment and the right problem, the right pressure, applying that pressure right to the right pressure point. And I think, again, that's a place not every MSP necessarily needs to go. But I think if we're going to continue to remain relevant, we're going to drive further into business outcomes. It's going to be, I've always said this, not just in this context, but, he, she who has the most friends wins. And I've always said that through the context of like, who comes to your funeral when this is all over, right? What's really important at that point is like, did anybody show up? Did they want to remember you? I think looking at life through that lens, whether it's your friends, your significant others, or your clients, and what you can bring to the table, that network is so important. And people don't really care if it's you. I've never white labeled any tool because my clients are smart enough to know I didn't invent a VoIP telephone system. So I've always kept daylight between us and the solutions we're selling. But it just makes us look that much stronger to them and more mature to them, that we've got this network of really excellent people that we can bring to the table for that specific need. And then it just validates everything we're talking about versus making us look less valuable to them.
I think what Joe left out there is, and I've known Joe for 5 years now. The initial pitch that I heard from him when I was at Synex is he would always say, we have this Rolodex. And I always loved that about him because it showed that vulnerability, right? It's like, I'm not trying to be your expert to everyone. I have friends, I have people that are trusted, that are those SMEs in the space. And that's one thing I think that makes, TransformITive really unique. And like Joe said, we're very authentic with our customers. We're upfront, we're honest, and we take that time to go vet those people. So when they come to us with those problems, and like Joe said, taking that leadership role, we can still be leaders. We have enough industry experience to say, hey, I can own this project, I can drive it forward, but then know who are those puzzle pieces I need to bring in so that the client gets that outcome that they want, because they're beautiful artists and do amazing stuff in buildings. I could never do any of that stuff. My stick people are bad, but we can bring in the right people and say, hey, we have these really talented people like you are, and you can trust us to run that initiative for you. And I think that part of that is having that Rolodex.
Yeah, I think it's important. We were just having lunch with another MSP colleague, and he's mentioning that he's in a similar process, but his strength, as a business and as a provider, is not necessarily to be a SOC or to have the in-house security team. It is to be the advisory on what to go implement and, advise the client on, the forward thinking motion of that. So it's just kind of a different focus because largely a lot of us out there try to naturally drift towards the cybersecurity, leading talk track, to try to attract customers. And obviously there's a lot going on there, which is like what kinds of customers you'll attract based off of them being breached recently or whatever it might be. But it does allow you to flex out, in your areas of expertise, but also keep your cogs under control too for maximizing your internal focus areas and strengths, which I think is one of the biggest takeaways I've heard from multiple people we've interviewed now is that you can actually go do what you're best at, enjoy it, and then succeed in the clients having a really great engagement with you as well too. So there's a lot of byproducts there. I think the hard part is building that Rolodex, right? And the due diligence you do around those engagements. But I think it's time worth spent, right? If you take 10 years and you build up a good network, then you've got great resources to flex out. So
it's starting as just being humble enough to know that none of us knows everything. None of us got where we are alone, and being willing to partner up with someone else. I have many more co-competitors than I do competitors. And we share information, share projects, share opportunities. And I think it comes back to that concept of just trying not to be everything to everyone. And there's confidence that comes with that too, when you're not trying to lean out over the edge too far. I always said, I'm going to help the customer get to not going to take you to the bleeding edge. I don't want to waste all your money and, disrupt the organization, but we might go to the bruised edge. We might go out there a little bit. But yeah, I think that's key. That's leaning into your network, building the network, and it does take time, but it's also so important, getting out and going to the events, networking with I think that's the most powerful thing, even whether it's in your own community and it's a networking organization that you can attend, or going to the many amazing events that we have in the channel, the MSP channel. Just great places to go learn, challenge yourself. If you're willing to be humble, you'll find out people are going to share what did and didn't work. One of my favorite events I used to go to was called FailCon, and it was held in San Francisco every year. And literally every talk, every keynote was somebody who epically just flamed out. But they're here on stage to tell you what they learned from that so you can avoid it. And I just thought, man, that's just the right way to do this. That's just absolutely the right way to do this. Because we all fail, right? Like, how do we come back better? And that's something that we've always told our clients too, is like, hey, we're human here. We're going to mess up. We need to have a great rapport here where we can be allowed to fail. Like, we're not going to, in the sense of like blow up your company. But if everything is about blame and how do we get, we just can't focus on a solution, then it puts people on the back foot and they can't do their best work. And that's something that we've always taken, even internally as a culture, is like, if you mess up, you must tell everybody. I think I borrowed that from another company whose name I'll leave out of this, but the point was, hey, we learn quickly, we can adjust it, hopefully before the customer finds it, and then we can figure out how do we not do that again. I think that's having that understanding with the client that we're all human, and with our own team, just kind of creates a far more collegiate culture where we're all learning from one another.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's what I love the most about the channel. Starting my journey at PEXA, got exposed to a really great network of individuals and just a completely different side where I used to work at Charles Schwab, not to downgrade that company. It was just a completely different atmosphere. Being a stockbroker at a Fortune 500 company is quite different than working in the channel. So
I can imagine.
Yeah. So as we're winding down here on time, I want to ask a little bit more of a fun question, just in general, as far as just a diverse question, and then we can start wrapping up here. But Joe, I know you've got a heavy interest on the musical side, and I'd love to hear, maybe how that's influenced your career, as an MSP, or how you use it, in some of those qualities and to influence your day to day.
I think probably the simplest thing I could say is just embracing the creative side of yourself. Dan can definitely empathize with this. Like, there's a great book that Start With Why, Simon Sinek, and he kind of lays out the thesis that every company has the doers, but you also need the people to know why. You need people who can do the how, and you need the people who understand why we're doing this and continue. And it turns out a lot of the people who know the why are artists. And that was a truism. I've worked in the video game industry. I've worked in the music industry, which kind of gives me a very weird set of skills and background to bring to this MSP space. But I think getting comfortable with and embracing the fact that that is a talent, it is a needed talent, and it kind of not feeling like an imposter, showing up and presenting that is a skill set that people want and need. And I think once I understood that and I didn't feel shame about it, I guess, because that's my own personal journey, is like kind of owning that I had a very different walk up to this. I think once I kind of embraced that, it's every day, like taking time out, even just, I didn't give myself time out to work on music because I was like taking time away from the business, away from my family. But whether it's traveling, photography, some outlet like that, I'd want to just drive that home, take that time away, recharge, because that's you. That's what you bring to work. And if you don't have you to bring to work or to your family or elsewhere, you're hurting. And it will come across in other ways that are not always very positive. And so that's the one thing I would impart is like embrace your creativity, embrace those outlets, give yourself the time. There's always going to be work that comes back and fuels your soul, and your clients and your family and everybody will notice.
I love that. Yeah, I just got away last week and it was super great to come back totally energized this week. So feel that. How about you, Robby? I don't know as much about your hobbies, but it looks like golf back there. I don't know if that's helping or hurting in some cases. But.
It's golf. It's both.
Yeah.
I would say you probably noticed too a lot of nerd culture items and collectibles back there. It's always fun because, being the sales guy, quote unquote, a lot of the IT folks that I talk to are like, I'm not going to get along with this guy. And then I kind of floor them with the nerdy side that I have. And I've always kind of been that way. I was the jock in school that was also hanging out with the nerds because I was just into both. And back when we grew up, that was very much different. So bringing that in, there was one of the customers I was talking about just before, that was how I hit it off with him. He saw one of the Lord of the Rings book holders that I had, and he's like, I'm so into that. And I'm like, The Hobbit is still my favorite book.
Nice. No, that's really cool. I have a whole side here. I've got some memorabilia collecting behind me, but I try not to go too far because it'll turn the whole office into that. So yeah.
I won't show you the rest of my office. I was extremely proud and very embarrassed.
Depends on who walks in, right? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, nice. Well, awesome, guys. Dan, I don't know if you want to close us out here, but any final thoughts there?
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. And Joe and Robby, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for being Cloud Capsule partners. We really appreciate your partnership and the guidance that you've given us over the last couple of months as you start to use our platform. But it's also great just to have these conversations. I think this is where a lot of us met, having these types of conversations about where we've been, what the current challenge is, and what the future really starts to look like, and how are we going to tackle it together. I'm glad that we're on this journey together. So I really appreciate you guys joining us today.
Here. Thank you guys so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.